After marrying James, I made him 3 years' worth of lovingly prepared bento boxes. Only later did I find out that every single meal ended up in the mouth of his little secretary. All that care had nourished her into a plump, fair-skinned, and charming young woman. That day, James once again urged me to wake up early. For the first time in 3 years, I defied his wishes and slept in. An hour later, the little secretary posted, "The free maid slacked off today and didn't make breakfast, so someone had to cook for himself." But James flew into a rage. "Grace is my wife after all. You can't humiliate her like this." At that moment, I suddenly laughed at his excessive indecisiveness. I was different from him. A man who changed his heart was no longer someone I wanted. When James urged me to get up early, I habitually sat up. After a few dazed seconds, I lay back down. James slowly opened his eyes, which he had just closed, and frowned slightly. "Don't sleep anymore. Any later and there won't be enough time to make breakfast." Seeing that I had no intention of getting up, he reached out and pulled me into his arms, coaxing me softly. "Honey, could you make something for me to eat?" I turned to face him, my tone calm. "James, I'm not feeling well, so I won't be making breakfast for you today." James' smile froze for a moment, but he didn't ask where I was hurting. Gradually, he loosened his embrace. Then, he got up an hour earlier than usual and left without saying a word to me. After he left, I stood on the balcony watching his retreating figure for a long time. I knew James was a little upset. After 3 years of marriage, today was the first time I didn't wake up early to make him a lovingly prepared lunchbox. Especially since last night he reminded me several times, even specifically requesting dishes I'd never made before. For this, I prepared ingredients until late at night. But just before bed, someone sent me screenshots, posts from James's assistant's social media. "Woo-woo, finally got to eat the boss's home-cooked meals. The boss said I can have them whenever I want." The earliest timestamp was from 3 years ago, when James and I had just gotten married. As more and more photos surfaced, I finally understood. For the past 3 years, every single one of my lovingly prepared lunch boxes ended up in his little secretary's mouth. I'd fed his little secretary until she became fair-skinned, plump, and utterly charming. That night, I watched the man sleeping beside me and silently shed tears. This James before me, I realized I'd never truly seen him clearly. My phone pinged with a notification. Someone had sent me another screenshot of the secretary's post. "The free maid slacked off today and didn't make breakfast, so someone had to cook personally." The photo showed a hand wearing a wedding ring holding a freshly made breakfast. In the 3 years we'd been together, James had never once stepped into the kitchen. But now, for another woman, he could wake up an hour early to prepare breakfast at her place. At this moment, my already shattered heart cracked open with fresh wounds. I held back the sting in my eyes. Beneath the comments, James replied to her, "Grace is still my wife after all. You can't humiliate her like this." I don't know what state of mind James was in when he said those words. In that instant, I suddenly laughed at his spineless indecision. I let the tears stream down my face, but my gaze gradually grew resolute. A man who's changed his heart, I won't keep him anymore. After James left, I remained motionless on the balcony. I don't know how much time had passed before he finally remembered me and gave me a call. His tone on the phone was gentle and concerned, still maintaining that good husband persona he put on for me. "Grace, how are you feeling? Still unwell? I'm sorry, I left in such a hurry this morning because of work and didn't get to say goodbye." Had I not seen those photos, I might have been moved by his words. But now, my heart was eerily calm. I slowly replied, "It's nothing, just a bit dizzy from waking up early." James sighed in relief on the other end and asked if I'd had breakfast yet. I told him I hadn't. James fell silent for a few seconds, visibly displeased. "Grace, why don't you take better care of yourself? You really worry me. Wait at home, I'll bring you breakfast." Before I could refuse, James immediately hung up. I glanced at my phone as another message arrived, another screenshot. Ugh, the boss really values food, huh? Sending his wife the leftovers from my breakfast. I admit, at that moment, every emotion in my heart was stirred by those words. I had never imagined, never dared to imagine, that James would go this far for me. I dug my nails deep into the flesh of my arm and tilted my head back, staring at the sky for a long time. In the end, I held back every tear, trapping them all within my eyes. I told myself I wouldn't shed another tear for James. Because he didn't deserve it. James soon returned, with his little secretary Sophie trailing behind him. They must have just come from her place. The secretary unpacked the breakfast boxes James was holding and laid them out before me. She looked at me with smiling eyes. "Madam, Mr. James personally bought these for you. Please try some." I studied the woman before me carefully without speaking. She was beautiful, with large eyes that held a kind of innocent clarity. Clearly someone who'd been pampered for a long time. James deliberately took a small step forward, blocking my view of the woman. He reached out to feel my forehead, then gently tucked my stray hair behind my ear. "I'm heading to work. Finish your breakfast and rest a bit more. Call me if you still don't feel well." James gave me careful instructions before leaving with his young secretary in the car. After he left, the housekeeper emerged from the kitchen. She looked at the scattered leftovers on the table with confusion. "Madam, this looks like someone else's leftovers. Where did the master get this? Didn't we have food prepared at home? There was no need to buy outside." I chuckled lightly and told the nanny to throw those things in the trash. "Your husband must have water in his brain. James didn't work overtime too late today and even bought me a bouquet of roses when he came back. But it seems he's forgotten, I detest roses the most. He still remembered when we were dating. But after marriage, those little romantic gestures in life became rare from him." Seeing me stare blankly at the bouquet, James' smile gradually faded. He snatched the flowers from my hands like a petulant child, ready to toss them outside. "If you don't like them, I'll just throw them away." As James was about to reach the door, I suddenly called out to him. "It's not that I don't like them, I hate them. James, how could you forget that roses are what I despise the most?" James froze in place for a moment, not even daring to turn and meet my eyes. He really had stopped caring long ago. The faint glimmer of hope hidden in my heart vanished, yet my expression remained eerily calm. Just as I turned to head upstairs, James suddenly spun around and pulled me into an embrace. He buried his face in my shoulder and whispered an apology. "Grace, I'm sorry. I'll never forget anything about you again." "Yeah, okay." I only replied with those two words, without arguing with him. After I went upstairs, James stood there watching me for a long time. At 9 in the evening, James personally cooked a bowl of noodles for me. It was exactly the same as the noodles in the photo his assistant had sent in the morning. I only took one bite before putting down my chopsticks. Without any emotional attachment, this bowl of noodles before me was practically inedible. Seeing I'd only taken one bite, James didn't get angry. He picked up the chopsticks I'd just used and finished the rest himself. When James went downstairs to return the dishes, another message popped up on my phone. It was still from that stranger who had sent me photos. What should I do if I miss my boss after work hours? In less than 5 minutes, James changed out of his pajamas and came back in wearing a suit. There was a hint of guilt on his face, one I had never noticed before. "Honey, there's an emergency at the company. I need to head out." I nodded and added one more sentence. "If you're really busy, don't bother coming back tonight." The urgency on James's face was replaced by anger as he stared at me intently. "No matter how late it gets, I'll come back to be with you." James came back at 3 in the morning. Perhaps too exhausted, he only took off his coat before climbing into bed. When James reached out to hold me, a faint trace of perfume drifted into my nose. It smelled eerily similar to the scent his little secretary Sophie had worn yesterday. A wave of physical nausea washed over me. In that moment, I wrenched myself from his embrace and leaned over the edge of the bed, vomiting. James turned on the light and gently patted my back. Tears streamed down my cheeks, soaking the sheets. My sobs grew louder until they became hoarse and ragged. I'd promised myself I wouldn't cry for him again, yet here I was, breaking that vow. James was terrified. His grip around my waist tightened repeatedly. When I finally stopped crying, I pried his large hands away from me, inch by inch. Meeting James' eyes filled with heartache. "James, you smell terrible." The man froze for a moment before forcing a casual tone. "Then I'll go take a shower." "No need. Go stay in the guest room." James raised an eyebrow, giving me a complicated look before remaining motionless for a long while. I pressed a hand to my throbbing forehead. I hadn't wanted to confront him so soon. "James, do you really take me for a fool?" The man's eyes flickered slightly, uncertain whether I had already discovered something. So he dared not ask me the reason. He feared that piercing through the thin veil between us would leave no room for retreat. A moment later, James concealed the depth in his gaze and smiled at me. "All right, then get some rest." As he left, he gently closed the door behind him. Since that night, the stranger never sent me another message. James also stopped working late shifts. The 3 years of uninterrupted breakfasts, he never mentioned them again. It wasn't until his little secretary came to my home, pleading with me, that I found out. It turned out James had fired Sophie. Sophie had chosen to come during James's work hours. But that day, unfortunately, James happened to be home. To make the man feel sorry for her, she changed her approach to beg me. "Madam, I came to say goodbye. Mr. James has dismissed me, and I'm going home to get married." In that instant, James's face darkened immediately. The woman acted as if she didn't notice the man on the sofa and continued speaking pitifully. "Thank you for your kindness and Mr. James's care over these years. After I leave this time, we probably won't see each other again in this lifetime. When is the wedding?" I nodded and then asked the question everyone present wanted to know. The woman smiled through her tears, revealing reddened eyes. "Next week. That man is 10 years older than me. My family arranged it." While speaking to me, the woman kept glancing toward James. The man stiffened back, never turned around. After she left, I didn't close the door, silently counting the seconds on the clock. At the 7th second, James suddenly stood up, grabbed his car keys, and stormed out. When leaving, he even forgot to make up an excuse to explain himself to me. That night was the first time James didn't come home. 2 more photos appeared in my phone. One last fling before parting. One was a screenshot sent by Sophie. The other was a blurred photo of them together on a hotel bed. Sophie's provocation this time had quite an effect on James. These past few days, he's been constantly distracted during company meetings. He didn't even notice the subtle maneuvers I'd been making at home. When he returned home, James became noticeably colder toward me. Perhaps it was because of me that he ended up firing Sophie. Now he must be regretting it. So, his longing and reluctance toward Sophie unconsciously turned into misplaced resentment directed at me. Finally, on the eve of Sophie's wedding, James stood on the balcony smoking incessantly. After finishing nearly half a pack, he flung the cigarette box away with force and dashed out like a madman. Before the car drove off, I stood where he had been and shouted downstairs, "James, do you really have to go?" James had already opened the car door, leaning against the vehicle as he silently gazed at me. "Wait for me to come back." With those words, he drove away without hesitation. Watching the car disappear into the darkness, I smiled faintly. "James, so this is goodbye." The next morning, my parents came to take me home. My luggage had been packed overnight, and not a single item was left behind when loaded into the car. Ever since I discovered James's change of heart, I had already contacted my parents. The reason I didn't confront him directly about divorce was that I had brought a substantial dowry when we married. Over these 3 years, many of my interests have become intertwined with James's. Extricating these assets will take time. Coincidentally, Sophie has given me an opportunity. I emptied the entire house of everything that belonged to me. I didn't take a single cent of his, everything here was purchased with my own money. As I was leaving, the housekeeper asked me tearfully, "Madam, did Mr. James hurt you? You loved him so much, you wouldn't have gone this far unless he wounded you deeply." I married James right after graduating from university. For him, I gave up the chance to study abroad. For him, I devoted the best years of a woman's youth. And from the very beginning, it was all just a lie. Even if Sophie had appeared after we got together, I wouldn't have left so decisively. But according to my investigation, during the time James was pursuing me, he was still entangled with his little secretary, never having broken it off. I was just a wife he chose who matched his social status when he reached marriageable age. Perhaps there was a tiny bit of affection too. But that little affection wasn't enough to make me forgive his betrayal. After leaving here, my parents and I went straight to James' parents' place. When I presented the divorce agreement, I made sure James paid dearly. I took a hefty sum of money from him. James' mother still tried to persuade me to forgive her son one more time. "Grace, James must have had a momentary lapse in judgment. Don't worry, when he returns from his business trip, I'll make sure he apologizes to you." I took out the photos of James crashing the wedding, taken by the private investigator. James' parents were left speechless. With business collaboration still ongoing between our families, they didn't dare to push things too far with mine. When James' parents attempted to plead further, my father's expression turned icy. "Agree to it. If you persist, I won't mind making this scandal known to everyone." In the end, I secured James' parents' guarantee regarding the divorce terms. Before James returned, I would leave the country to pursue the dreams I hadn't completed upon graduation. Before leaving this time, I took the initiative to contact James. The phone rang for a long time on the other end, and Sophie answered. The woman's voice couldn't conceal her hidden delight and the triumphant arrogance of a victor. "Madam, Mr. James is showering. Would you like me to go in and call him?" I chuckled softly, drawing glances from people around me at the airport. When the laughter subsided, I slowly exhaled. "No need. I was looking for you. Those photos, you were the one who sent them to me, weren't you?" Sophie remained silent on the other end. "I wanted to thank you. If it weren't for you, how could I have divorced him so smoothly?" At the mention of divorce, Sophie's breathing noticeably quickened. Did she really think that just because James and I divorced, she could marry him? James has always prioritized personal gain. He would never marry someone beneath his social standing. If he had wanted to, he would have publicly acknowledged Sophie's existence long before marrying me. How could he have let her stay by his side all these years without any status? I can't wait to see what becomes of this woman who has schemed so hard for James, now that I'm out of the picture. James's voice came through the phone. "Sophie, bring my clothes in." Sophie's heart raced with excitement as she eagerly hung up. When she entered the bathroom, she considerately draped a bathrobe over James. She gently coaxed the man, who was still in a good mood, testing his limits. "Boss, why don't you divorce Grace and marry me instead?" Sophie was lost in her own beautiful fantasy, completely oblivious to the man's increasingly cold expression. "We've been sneaking around for years now. It's not like you married her for love anyway, just for her family's connections." The next second, James grabbed Sophie's chin, his eyes turbulent with emotion. "Sophie, if you dare mention Grace again, I'll really leave you." Sophie winced in pain from James' grip, tears welling up in her eyes. After a few seconds, James pulled her into his arms, softening his tone. "Sophie, just stay like this forever." James thought to himself, since he couldn't bear the thought of Sophie marrying another man, the only solution was to keep her by his side and never let go. As for Grace, marrying her had indeed been a matter of convenience at first. But now, even he wasn't sure. The usually calm and rational James, had he ended up falling for his own act? The day James brought Sophie back, he first took her home. Just as he was about to return and console me, he received a call from his parents. His father berated him harshly over the phone. James assumed his father had found out about him seeking out Sophie. After all, even before the marriage, his parents had known about Sophie's existence. Keeping Sophie as his secretary had been part of the deal he struck with them when he married Grace. Arriving at his parents' house, James's heartbeat suddenly quickened. A sense of unsettled panic surged through him, instantly causing cold sweat to bead on his forehead. The moment he stepped inside, his mother threw her arms around him and began weeping. This feeling completely flooded his entire body. "James, we were all fooled. That Grace is no meek little rabbit to be trifled with. She took 30% of your assets." A deafening buzz filled James's head, and the world seemed to spin violently. His mother's lips kept moving, but James could no longer hear a single word. "She actually sent someone to follow you and took photos to threaten us. Just because of a woman? Was it really necessary to divorce you over someone you didn't even bring before her?" James took a deep breath, his eyes already tinged with red. After a long pause, he spoke bitterly. "Grace, where is she now?" When the divorce papers were handed to James, he stared blankly at the signature on them. Something warm welled up in his eyes. He still remembered the first time he met Grace. He could tell at a glance that she liked him. In a marriage tied to interests, Grace was the only one he had ever found somewhat agreeable. Before they married, they had dated for half a year. Back then, Sophie was upset because of his impending marriage news, so he spent most of his time with her. As for Grace, he only needed to give her a small gift to keep her happy for days. Later, he thought. Having a wife who adored him wholeheartedly didn't seem so bad. From the moment he married her, James never once imagined there would come a day when they'd divorce. Yet today, the woman who loved him most was the first to propose separation. James didn't sign the divorce agreement Grace left behind. So Grace's parents had someone publicize those photos and even went as far as severing all their business collaborations, regardless of the cost. The fault lay with him, he admitted it, readily taking full responsibility. As for Sophie, she was now trapped in her home, too afraid to step outside. She called him dozens of times every day, and James hung up on all of them. He never expected that this woman, whom he had doted on for years, would deceive him and deliberately provoke his wife. Despite Sophie repeatedly insisting she hadn't sent those screenshots, no one else had any reason to want him and Grace to separate. Grace loved him most, she must have seen those things and, in a fit of anger, asked for a divorce. James would find her and beg for her forgiveness. Even if it meant kicking Sophie out, he would do it without hesitation. Only now, after all this, did James finally realize who truly held the most important place in his heart. Sophie left to get married, and he was angry, but that was just male possessiveness at play. Grace was different, her departure left James in constant, unrelenting pain. The pain blinded him to the existence of everyone else in the world. The pain made life feel utterly meaningless. In his 30-something years of life, James had never experienced such unbearable agony. Grace had blocked all his contact information, yet she hadn't hidden her whereabouts. She had gone abroad for graduate studies. James immediately booked the earliest flight, he was going after her. Since she hadn't concealed her destination, she must be giving him a chance. A chance to chase her overseas and bring her back. James finally smiled. Grace still held a lingering affection for him after all. James came to find me abroad, which I hadn't expected. But I didn't deliberately avoid him. Some wounds can't be resolved by running away. We found a cafe and sat down, neither of us speaking for a while. I checked the time and glanced at the man across from me. "Did you need something?" "I have class this afternoon and I'm in a hurry." James lowered his eyes, his voice hoarse as he apologized. "Grace, I'm sorry." I took a sip of coffee, my expression still calm. "You should be sorry, but I won't accept your apology." "James, I never woke up before 9 at home, but for you, I haven't slept in once these past 3 years." The pain in James' heart began to spread again, each of Grace's words striking him like nails. At this moment, James slowly realized just how much he had wronged her. I drained the coffee in my cup, its bitter taste spreading through my mouth. "Compared to finding out you were with Sophie, those 3 years of lovingly prepared lunch boxes I made for you are what I can't forgive even more. James remained silent as I paid the bill and stood to leave. Not long after I walked out, James came running after me. He stopped in front of me and, in front of all the passers-by, slapped himself hard twice across the face. Grace, all those things were my fault. I'll send Sophie away. Let's go home together. I looked toward the school and shook my head. But I don't need it anymore. Compared to being James' wife, I prefer being myself. James, I think I regret loving you. That day, I walked ahead with my classmates, chatting and laughing. James stood there watching me for a long time. Someone asked me who he was, and I answered with a smile, a stranger. James stayed here for a week, waiting for me at the school gate every day. Since everything had been laid bare, I ignored him completely. Later, after James returned to his home country, he locked himself in his room for several days. When he emerged, he signed the divorce papers. During my first holiday back from studying abroad, I returned home. While dining with friends, I ran into Sophie in the hallway. She saw me too, but the clarity in her eyes was gone. I let my friends enter the private room first as Sophie approached me. The hatred in her eyes flared up instantly. Didn't expect you to play such high-level games. James dumped me right after visiting you. But don't get too smug, without me, he'll just find someone else. Right now, there's already another woman in his arms. I was speechless. James and I had already divorced. How could I still be dragged into his mess? How many women he had around him had long ceased to be my concern. I was about to speak when a woman with a stunning figure emerged from the neighboring booth. She was the complete opposite of Sophie's innocent, delicate appearance. The woman walked toward us, instantly drawing Sophie's fury. You really have no shame, following us here. James told you to get lost. Sophie's eyes reddened with anger as she raised her hand to strike the woman. The woman took the opportunity to collapse onto the floor, crying out in a pitiful voice, James, save me. That crazy woman is hitting me. I hadn't expected the woman to suddenly call for help. Just as I reached the booth's entrance, I bumped into James. The man froze on the spot, but I ignored him completely and turned to walk back into the booth. James and his group of friends walked in behind him. By then, the sound of the two women arguing in the hallway had already faded. They were James's friends and also knew my group of friends. Someone suggested we all sit together and hang out. My friend glanced at me, seeking my opinion. I checked the time and nodded. As if by prior agreement, everyone deliberately nudged James, pushing him to sit beside me. Just as James was about to sit down, I placed my bag on the sofa next to me. I spoke coolly, there's one more person who hasn't arrived yet. This seat is reserved for him. James's eyes flickered, and he moved a seat away from me. The atmosphere grew momentarily awkward. Someone, trying to lighten the mood, gradually steered the conversation toward amusing personal anecdotes. As the conversation went on, someone suddenly asked me, Grace, have you found someone else since divorcing James? No one noticed how James' hand gripping the wine glass suddenly tightened, spilling wine onto the back of his hand. James' friend glared at the person who had just spoken. He chuckled awkwardly to ease the tension. Who doesn't know Grace loved James? They'll definitely reconcile later. Young couples quarrel sometimes, they'll make up after cooling off. James looked up at me with hopeful eyes. Everyone was waiting for my response. Just then, the private room's door was pushed open. I stood up and waved at him, pouting with a hint of complaint, Why are you so late? Everyone's been waiting for you. The man took the seat I had saved for him, facing the ambiguous gazes of the crowd. Smiling, I introduced him to everyone. This is my senior, and also my boyfriend. Time seemed to freeze for a few seconds. James's glass slipped from his hand, shattering with a crisp sound that echoed painfully in everyone's hearts. That night, after we left, James sat alone in my seat. He drank until dawn. After I completed my 3 years of studies, James came to see me for the last time. During those 3 years, he had visited me no fewer than 10 times. But this time, he didn't stand in the distance silently watching me. He walked toward me, and I asked my boyfriend to wait for me at the nearby supermarket. James glanced at my boyfriend, his tone unreadable. "This doesn't seem to be the same one I saw last time?" "Yeah, the last one broke up." James nodded and said nothing more. Ever since that gathering where he saw my boyfriend, it seemed James had developed a peculiar hobby. He always liked to scrutinize the men around me. Over the past 3 years, he was the first to notice every boyfriend I had. This time, James seemed different. Whenever he came to see me before, he would always find topics to chat about. But today, he was unusually quiet. Since he wasn't speaking, I didn't want to keep up this awkward standoff either. Before I could say anything, something flickered in James's eyes. "Grace, I'm getting married." My reply was crisp. "Congratulations." Even though James showed how deeply he felt for me, didn't he still marry someone else before me? So you see, a man's words can't be trusted. I only allow myself to be fooled once. James heard not a trace of sorrow in my words and let out a bitter laugh. Now he finally understood, Grace had truly let him go. After returning home, I learned that James' new wife was actually my old rival. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She had pursued James for 2 years, after he married me. Heartbroken, she moved far away to another city and never returned during that time. A friend told me that actually, just 1 month after James and I divorced, that woman got divorced too. All these years, she'd been pestering James constantly. If it weren't for the broken capital chain of James's company and his father threatening suicide to force him into marriage with her, this lovesick woman probably wouldn't have gotten her wish fulfilled in her entire lifetime. Upon learning of my return, she couldn't wait to meet me. Sitting across from me with the haughty posture of a swan's neck, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. I sincerely wished her well. "May you and James have a happy marriage and a child soon." Hearing my genuine blessing, the woman turned her head away and snorted uncomfortably. "We don't need you to say it, we'll be happy together forever." Their wedding day was grand and lavish. However, a small incident occurred during this magnificent ceremony. Sophie suddenly appeared and announced in front of all the guests that she was already pregnant with James's child. Everyone expected the bride to call off the wedding, but she didn't. Sophie was escorted away, and the wedding proceeded as planned. Later, it was said that Sophie was kept in a villa, and the child in her womb was not aborted. On the day Sophie gave birth, James's new wife also delivered a full-term baby. Faced with James's fury, the woman stood her ground. She and I each had won, fair and square. In the end, James was the one at fault, so he had no choice but to swallow the humiliation and accept it. After James remarried, his new wife kept him on a tight leash. All his female assistants were replaced, and he couldn't stay out past 8 p.m. At first, James didn't mind, but then the woman started causing trouble with all his friends. Since his company still needed financial support, he didn't dare burn bridges. As a result, the pressure inside James grew heavier and heavier. Sophie seized this opportunity to cling to James again. Having grown accustomed to sneaking around, they always found a way to meet. Her gentle, considerate nature stood in stark contrast to his new wife, and James soon found himself lost in her tender embrace once more. Sophie, emboldened by having borne James a son, became even more brazen than before. After several months of their affair, she became pregnant again. Just as Sophie began dreaming of securing her position with their children, James' company suddenly declared bankruptcy. James's new wife was different from me, she never once considered leaving him. Even if he didn't love her, even if he betrayed her time and again. The woman had made up her mind to cling to James for life. James, needing a favor, had no choice but to bow his head and beg for mercy. The woman had only one condition. Later, it was said that James personally took Sophie to the hospital to abort the child. The promised sum of money was also taken back. After that, rumors spread that Sophie's first child wasn't actually James's. Some said that child might have become a sacrificial pawn. There was no way James wouldn't have done a paternity test initially, so why was this only coming to light now? truth and lies, who could really tell? In the end, Sophie slunk back to her hometown with that child in disgrace. I heard about this matter and just laughed it off. It seems James is completely under his wife's thumb. On my wedding day, James came with his wife and child. We hadn't seen each other for several years, and I never expected James to become like this. Over those years, he had gained a lot of weight, and the sharp, handsome features of his face were no longer recognizable. The moment he saw me, James immediately lowered his head, exuding an overwhelming sense of inferiority. As he nervously ushered his child to sit in the front row, the woman said to me, "Hasn't he changed a lot? Only when he becomes ugly will his heart stay with me." I didn't know what to say, so I could only offer my silent blessings. The woman saw the expression on my face but didn't seem angry. She even laughed softly, though I couldn't tell what had crossed her mind. "I know you look down on me, but I just love James. You should actually thank me. If it weren't for those photos I sent you, you'd still be waking up early to make love-filled lunchboxes for someone." My heart skipped a beat. She was the one who had sent me those photos. After collecting myself for a moment, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" The woman gazed at the father and son pair ahead, her face blooming with a blissful smile. "With your temperament, if I hadn't made you completely give up on him, how could you have left him so decisively? As expected of my lifelong rival, she knows me well. But regardless of her motives, it was this incident that made me see James for who he truly was. Only then could I escape in time, only then could I attain the happiness I have today." We exchanged a knowing smile, both understanding each other perfectly. James left midway through the wedding. He didn't stay to witness my entire ceremony. That day, someone photographed James rushing from the wedding venue to stand silently before our former home. He remained there alone for a long time. After James went bankrupt, that villa had already been sold. All memories of him and me have long since faded into the past. The woman followed James here and took the man's hand. She asked nothing. "Honey, let's go home." James let himself be led away, following the woman home as if drained of all vitality. His belated affection stirred no emotion in me whatsoever. The past has long been forgotten in the river of time. Even the memories have nearly blurred beyond recognition. Because I will never look back on what once was.